Welcome, everyone. So this session is about the concepts of degrowth and digital, and about how digital is essentially an accelerator of extreme growth, and we can create a better world and a better economy with less growth. We don't have to give up things, we just have to focus on less waste and less waste production. Let's get things a little into context. The global economy is currently estimated to be worth about $80 trillion. And economists estimate that we need about 3% growth per annum in order for the current economic model to remain successful. Well, if you follow that model out at $80 trillion at about 3% growth per annum, then by 2050, you have practically a $200 trillion economy. And the Earth is already collapsing under an $80 trillion economy. How is it going to in any way be able to cope with a $200 trillion economy? So the model that we have basically is not sustainable. We are destroying the planet with an economic growth model that has no future other than the destruction of life on this planet. If we look at the global temperatures over hundreds of thousands of years, we see the spikes beginning to happen. Essentially in the last 100 years, we see this extraordinary spiking of temperatures. And if we look over a slightly shorter time frame, we still see that absolute acceleration from 1900 onwards, but more particular since the 1970s. We look at this an even closer view of temperatures, and we really see from the 60s or the 70s, temperatures really started moving ahead at an extraordinary rapid pace. So it seems like the 1970 was a type of a tipping point where things really began to go into major accelerated mode. Look at here at extraction of raw materials, non-metals, ores, fossil fuels, biomass. We just see this massive extraction occurring from 1970 onwards, a massive acceleration in resource depletion. Humanity's energy system, again, we see from the 70s on, from 1900s, definitely a growth, but big spiking as we get from 1960, 1970 onwards in our energy systems. And the global carbon emissions, from 1900, and then we can see picking up from 1950, definitely gathering a pace, and then from 1970 onwards, really beginning to accelerate upwards. Earth Overshoot Day, which is an analysis of the amount that we as humans consume versus the Earth's ability to replace what we have consumed. And right now in 2019, they estimated we were consuming 1.75 Earth worths of ability to replenish those resources in a 12-month period. Again, back around 1970, it was roughly 1 on 1. So what we were extracting in any one year was being replaced either with trees regrowing or fish replenishing or otherwise. So Earth Overshoot getting much shorter as the years go, or much greater as the years go by. And this is the story. In a way, the story of Coca-Cola is the story of modern humanity. This is back in 1915, the standard Coca-Cola bottle was 6.5 ounces. Then in 1955, they moved to a 10-ounce bottle. Then in 1960, it was a 12-ounce can. Then the 20-ounce bottle, plastic bottle. and in McDonald's or whatever, the 40 ounce or the huge bottles. This is the story of the human race. More and more that is of less and less value and benefit. And of course, we have an obesity epidemic and diabetes epidemic sweeping the world because of our massive overdosing with cheap sugar and products like Coca-Cola. But this, more and more and more of all the wrong things that aren't even good for us. Plastic, somebody said, a member of the plastic industries in the 50s said, the future of plastics is in the trash can. We have a deliberate economic model that is built on waste. Apple or Samsung, they make money through creating products that quickly become waste and are not recyclable. They design essentially things that cannot be reused. Maybe Apple is a little bit better than many others, but the foundation of so many of these modern companies is to create waste that cannot be recycled and cannot be reused. So we see an explosion in plastic use since 1970 as well. It has outpaced all the other materials. And of course, we know that plastic is driven through convenience. It's the couple of minute decision that lasts for 1,000 years. So in natural systems, as somebody said, there is no such thing as waste. Everything becomes food for another organism. But what we create a unique type of waste that is not reusable. That not alone is it not reusable, but it is actually damaging to life on the planet. They estimate that by 2050, the weight of plastic in the oceans will be equal to the weight of fish. The legacy that we are leaving, the geologists are now recognizing a layer of plastic in the Earth's crust, that in 1,000 years, when they look back at us, they'll say these were the plastic people. This was the generation that what they left behind them was a layer of poisonous plastic that helped destroy and eliminate life on the planet. And you wouldn't mind if this was actually resulting in great efficiency, or that we were becoming marvelously efficient as a society and we're really using this energy productively. Productivity has actually declined severely since the 1950s. So we are using more and more material of the earth, creating more and more waste, and becoming less and less productive as a human species. So something is strange that is happening. The waste is overloading us, essentially, and not allowing us to develop levels of efficiency that we were able to develop in historical periods. And of course, the impact on other life on the planet is draconian. Marine populations have declined nearly 50% since 1970. Invertebrate species are in serious decline again since the 1970s. Wildlife has declined. Wildlife populations have fallen by more than 2/3 in less than 50 years. So something happened in 1970 that really put a massive foot on the accelerator for the destructive capacities of humans in this planet. What was it? We'll be looking at in a moment. Interestingly, since the 1970s as well, and even more extreme in the last 10 or 15 years, is the share of global wealth has concentrated in the richest 1%. So the rich 1% are probably at a level perhaps not known ever in human history in their concentration of actual wealth. And interestingly, it is the richest 1% who are by far the most the greatest damagers of the planet. It is not the poor people, it is not population growth that has created the extreme amount of CO2 damage. It is the behavior of rich people, and they're buying big yachts and SUVs and all the accumulated elements of society that reflects their actual richness. So it is the elite that is doing 100 times or 1,000 times more damage to the planet than it is ordinary people, ordinary working people of the world. And what allowed all that to happen? What has been the hidden accelerator, the hidden hand behind that, all that happening? I think modern computers is the core driver of the super-sized destructiveness of the modern world. It is Moore's law that has facilitated the extractive industries to be able to extract at a pace that they have never extracted. Because behind those machines, more and more are intelligent computers that allow for greater and faster production of things and destruction of things. Number of network connected devices. Just since 2003, look at the explosion in devices that we actually own. From 2003, an average of 0.08 per person to 6.58. We are exploding in devices, in digital devices that we keep for less time than we keep our t-shirts. We get rid of them every couple of years, just throw them away. The explosion in e-waste, which is one of the most poisonous wastes that you can create, poisonous and toxic. We're just looking here at a 16-year period where in 2014 it was estimated to be at 44 million metric tons. Now that is more than the weight of all commercial aircraft ever built. That's a lot of weight, 44 million metric tons, and that by 2030 it will practically have doubled to 74 million. And of course, we're all saying that we are changing because now we're bringing in renewables, etc. But we don't have an energy production problem. We have an energy consumption problem. By 2050, 6 million metric tons of new solar e-waste will be produced annually. And with the way it's currently going, the vast majority of that will not be recycled. Here's the current economics. Our current economics models are models of waste. They work on a waste model. So if you look at and this is just a typical example, a solar panel will typically yield about $3 if it is recycled. The current cost to recycle it is somewhere between $12 and $25, and that's not counting the transportation to get it to the place where it will actually be recycled. But to dump that solar panel costs $1. So why would you want to recycle anything? Our whole economics is based on waste. It is waste economics. The price of things prices in the ability to dump it and that you won't have anything to do with it. And if we're going to save ourselves and save the planet, we must radically restructure how we see waste and how we create waste. So data waste is another massive issue, or the data explosion. By 2035, it's estimated there'll be over 2,000 zettabytes. Now, I asked an expert in data centers to calculate how much, based on current prices, would it cost to store 2,000 zettabytes. And he estimated $58 trillion. Now, the current global economy is worth $80 trillion. By 2035, with a 3% growth, it will be about $120, $130 trillion. So even at that growth rate, storing data would cost almost half the global economy. This is not sustainable. Our growth in data is not sustainable. And 90% of this data is never used and it's never accessed. So we create waste from the start process. We collect stuff, whether marketing data or whatever data, that we know if we thought just for a second, this will never be used. And yet we collect it because we can, because it seems like it's cheap, but it's not cheap. 90% of data not analyzed, 90% of data never analyzed, 90% of IoT, Internet of Things data never used, according to IBM. And of course, in everything we create in digital, we have 90% waste levels. 90% plus of apps are not used. In fact, 90% loss, average daily active user, 90 days after an app is installed. Just like data or apps, the things we produce, you look inside companies, 90% of the systems are either old or should have been taken out. The vast majority of organizations I've seen over the years could run much better on 10% of the technical architecture that they actually had if it was properly planned, properly implemented, and properly designed in the process. How many websites? Almost 1.8 billion websites. 91% of content has never got any traffic from Google. And if you don't get any traffic from Google, well, you're probably not getting any traffic from anywhere else either. So we're creating these massive quantities of data and content that has no use and no function, right? And all these other technologies that are coming in, artificial intelligence, process requirements, the hunger for energy in artificial intelligence is massively exploding. Artificial intelligence design systems are tremendously wasteful in how they actually design AI systems. AI energy needs have risen by over 300,000 times since 2012. Bitcoin, people talking about Bitcoin as if it's some amazing system. One of the most dirtiest, most filthiest, most polluting technologies ever invented is Bitcoin. A transaction in Visa takes on average about 0.002 kilowatt hours of energy. The same transaction in Bitcoin takes 906 kilowatt hours, 500,000 times more inefficient. And we're talking about Bitcoin and blockchain as being some sort of an amazing solution for what? Destroying the planet, it sounds like. But so many other areas, making a call over that old phone and that old boring traditional phone line, if that created 1x of pollution, right? What does making a phone call over the web create? 10 times more. The web is 10 times less efficient at making calls than a phone line, because a phone line is dedicated to doing the job. So we have all these multi-purpose devices like our computers that are highly energy inefficient for a great many of the tasks that they are supposed to carry out. And why does that happen? Because we don't think about energy, we don't care about energy, and we don't focus on waste. So the change is to think and care about energy and to think and care about waste, because the most dangerous cost is the cost that is closest to zero, because that cost seems to be invisible, but it's not an invisible cost when you scale it up by millions and millions and billions of people and millions of actual devices. How do we change? How do we move out of this? I was thinking, I was looking at over, working in this digital space for over 25 years and developing the methodology around top tasks, which is a kind of a prioritization model focused on let's focus on what's important. And I was wondering, I was trying to identify, well, what were the organizations? Where did we see success in really cleaning up intranets and managing things better? Where did things work in a more efficient, energy conscious way? And what I saw was that there were organizations that were less focused on creation. They didn't have this obsession with creation and measuring production. They also had a focus on maintenance. So there were worlds that cared about maintaining what they had created. So if we want to move to this new world, we must move to a much more maintenance culture. There were cultures as well that exhibited greater sharing, greater collaboration. I've never seen successful intranets, for example, internal systems that were run just by the IT department or the comms or the whatever. Wherever I saw success, HR was working with comms, was working with IT, was working with, and they were collaborating and sharing and working together. And reuse. So a culture of reuse of code, reuse of content. And of course, that requires good information architecture, good search so that you can find and reuse stuff. So moving away from this creation culture, because we have now a consumerist creation culture that creates that, Coca-Cola, larger and larger drinks, that isn't good for us. It isn't good for us and it isn't good for the planet. And if we move to a much more maintenance-driven culture, a much more sharing-driven culture, and a much more reuse-driven culture, we can achieve these concepts of what is called degrowth. We can still have a wonderful lifestyle. We can still have our devices. We can still have our computers. We can talk to our friends, we can do the things that we do, but we won't be creating as much waste. And removing that waste will be good for the planet and will be good for us in the way we actually live. So thinking of reuse, we look at a plastic bag and the energy required to create a plastic bag. So you need to look at elements of the energy in the manufacture, or the waste in the manufacture and the waste in the use. So it's very cheap to create a plastic bag. That's the huge benefit of it. It has a 1,000-year, negative benefit from a waste, but it's actually economics are very positive. To create the amount of energy required to create a paper bag is 3 times greater than to create the same size of a plastic bag. And to create a bag of cloth is 131 times greater. So the model, we cannot achieve a sustainable new economic model if we don't really use the things that we create a lot and keep them for a long time. We cannot create a sustainable model based on replacing things every couple of months or every couple of years. That is not achievable. That will make things worse. That will make things worse because it requires significant energy to create things that last. So it often requires more initial energy to create the thing that lasts. And then over time, does it show the positive return? So things like holding on to your phone. The Green Alliance, UK Green Alliance, did some analysis about the benefits of holding on to your phone. If you get rid of your phone after 2 years, then the water footprint per year, litres equivalent, is 6,380. Massive amount of water to have actually made that phone. If you hold on to your phone for 3 years, because the longer you hold on to your phone, the less new phones need to be made. So it's one less phone needed to be made in year 2, so to speak. Year 3, year 4, year 5. So by holding on to your phone for 5 years versus getting rid of it in 2 years, you have more than halved the demand for water in the manufacturers of phones for one phone, so to speak, or the saving of the phone. In the carbon footprint, right, 36.2 kg. So a phone takes about 60 kg of CO2 to manufacture. somewhere in that territory. So by holding on to it for 5 years, you have halved its carbon footprint on a yearly basis. So digital devices in particular have a very high initial energy component in their manufacture because they are complicated, energy intensive things. To create a circuit board requires a very high energy intensive, a very clean manufacturing environment. So it requires a lot of energy to create these things. So it's critical that we create them that they will last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We need to radically relook at the life. You know, imagine if somebody came up to you and says, "Oh, how old is your child? Oh, she's 3. Oh, she's getting old. Have you thought about replacing her? I mean, 3 isn't that really old? I mean, only in digital is 2 or 3 old. How crazy! And on this planet that's billions of years old is something that's too old. Only in the modern weird world of the humans since 1970. So deleting, getting rid of the junk, getting rid of the crap. I'm not saying getting rid of stuff that you think, oh, this might genuinely be useful. No, looking for the stuff that is absolutely, unequivocally crap content, crap data. It has absolutely no function or no use. Now, most of my career has been doing this work called top tasks. And I've got a database, a computer where the surveys and the top task analysis are done. And I decided I'd eat my own dog food, so to speak, and I'd go in and I'd try and clean up the folder where all the previous versions of the top tasks are kept. When I looked at the folder, there was 13.7 gigabytes of data in the folder. So I said, let's see, can I just get rid of junk? I just want to just keep the stuff that I really need if I need to process one of these surveys again, and just get rid of everything else. So there were 13.7 gigabyte. I started looking and I started seeing, that in the folders were the processed files from the database. And because we're always tweaking and upgrading the software, every time we get a request to redo a survey, we always redo it from fresh, because it won't work with the software to create the PowerPoints, etc. So we always create it from fresh. So the old files are of no use. We always create a new file. So there's no benefit in keeping the old files. And they're the heaviest files of all. So I could start getting rid of them. And then I saw, there was all these copies and originals, and why they occurred, I'm not sure, but in loads of the environments, there was all these copies and folders. And then, original, even within the file folders, etc., there was originals, and so I got rid of all the copies, right? And then we had CSV and Excel. Why we kept 2 versions, I don't know. We only needed Excel folder and files. So I got rid of all the CSV folders. Then we had HTML produced in some of the environment. I couldn't understand. I asked the developer, why do you have HTML files being produced? He said, I don't know. Well, let's get rid of all the HTML files. We don't need them as well. And then all these multiple duplications in environments. Oh, sometimes 20, 30, 40 duplications. I don't know why it happened. Maybe the database went crazy at some stage, or something went wrong with the software. Temp files, we got rid of the temp files. And then sometimes we had done surveys in multiple languages, and then we merged all the languages together into a single Excel. So we didn't need all the individual folders. So deleted all of that. So when I got rid of all that junk, I had 1.7 gigabyte left. So I went from 13.7 down to 1.07 gigabyte. And let me tell you, this is even before, and these are surveys going back to 2008. I need to ask the question, why am I keeping them from 2008? Nobody's ever asked me for anything 2008, 2009. So next decision, I'd say, well, I'll just super archive or delete everything from 2008 and 14 backwards. When we start thinking about these issues, but we don't think about these issues. I'm as big, a committer of these crimes as anybody else. We don't think about storage, about cleaning up after us, etc. There's so much waste out there, so much absolute useless waste out there. So 92% crap. And probably it's more like 98% crap, if I just have 5 years of actual surveys that I go back over. So I want you to watch this video. From the EU CDC. So it lasted 30 seconds and it took up 1.7 gigabyte of data transferred, right? 1.7 gigabyte, right? So that I put the text in front of you in relation to what was in that video. So that I calculated took up about 2 kilobytes, right, to create that in HTML, right? So what was said in that 30-second video, I could have said, presented in HTML, probably more effectively with 2 kilobytes. So the video was 850 times more polluting than the HTML. But of course, we create videos and it's cool whether they're needed or not, or useful or not, but just thinking about these issues. We don't think about these issues, and we create these highly energy intensive things for no real benefit a lot of times. A lot of these videos, there's no reason that they should be in video. Turning stuff off, right? Constantly thinking about energy, thinking about how we consume energy. So that this organization principles at Green did some great analysis, and they looked at a desktop, a classical desktop. And they said at zero utilization, so in other words, you're not using it. It's on, the screen is on, and you're not using it. A desktop could be using 100 watts of power, right? At 50% utilization, it will go up to 180 watts. And at 100% utilization, it's at 200 watts. So to get to 100% utilization, it takes up 100 watts, but with no utilization at all, it's taking up 100 watts. And even when your computer is off, there's still power being drawn by the actual power pack, even when you've shut it down in the process. And these concepts are called about vampire power, about power that is being bled away without any benefit. So if we can get rid of vampire power and think of energy and shutting things down and turning things off when we're not actually using them. So we're not saying let's not use things, but let's not waste. Let's focus on the waste and focus on the production. And the collaborative environment. How does sharing reduce waste? How do collaborative environments reduce waste? Back around 2010, we did some work with a partner company, NetLife, in Norway for the Norwegian Cancer Society. And this was their homepage back then, and it was constantly asking for donations because they needed money to be funded, and they only got a certain amount from the government. We went out and did a top task for them in 2012, and what people were we asked Norwegian citizens, what's most important to you when you're coming to the Norwegian Cancer Society website? So they said they want to know about treatment, symptoms, prevention, research, choosing a hospital, patient rights. And what was at the very bottom of the list was all the donation tasks in yellow. So all the stuff that they were pushing on the homepage, there was no interest from the customers. So they analysed the Norwegian Cancer Society website, and they saw that at that stage they had about 5,000 pages of content and 45 people actually contributing. All of these very much on a part-time basis. So to address these issues of not giving the customer kind of not giving the citizen what they want, they created a much smaller team of professionals. So amateurs waste, professionals tend to not waste, right? So the more professional people are, the less likely they are to do wasteful activities. So they brought the team, a much smaller team. They trained them, but what was one of the most critical things is that they started talking to each other. The 45 people before, they never talked, because they only did it 10% of their time. So they never talked to the other people and what content they were creating. Because now it was a much smaller team, it was much more manageable, it was much more professional, and it was much more collaborative across the silos. So the cancer people working in the cancer section was talking to the people in the fundraising, was talking to the people in the research, prevention and rights. So they were all meeting regularly and a web editor on top. And then they would liaise with the subject matter experts to actually, get the core content from the researchers, etc. So it went down from 45 people to 6 people. And what they discovered as they started talking, these are just some of the things, this is why they got, the 5,000 pages, that they were discovering definitions. They had multiple definitions of cancer throughout their site. So skin cancer definition here, and skin cancer definition here, so in various different because they never talked, the 45 people never talked to each other. So as they get smaller and more professional and more cross-functional collaborative, they identified all this duplicative content, all this unnecessary content in the process. Here's the new site they came back with the 6 people more professional. They went from 5,000 pages down to 1,000 pages. Much more manageable, got rid of 4,000 pages of junk, much more efficient, focused on people's needs. So everybody was winning here. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, really focusing, except you might say, but what about the donations? Well, the donations basically doubled, if not trebled. In 2012 when they launched, and by 2016 donations were practically 3 times the annual web income, because by helping people do what they needed to do, by having much less content, much better managed, therefore much less waste. So collaborative, multidisciplinary environments, cross-functional environments create better results in every sense, but they also create less waste. They are much more sustainable. Collaboration is a much more sustainable model than silo-based models. Then I look back at the Norwegian Cancer Society about 2019, and what it was, it looks strange again. Went back to the old model of promoting concepts and lions. I don't know why the lion was here, but all the cancers had gone, and the internal team was frustrated because the old organizational thinking had come back. But they were progressive enough to redo the top tasks. They did the top tasks again in 2019, and essentially the same tasks coming up, very, very practical ones around treatment and late effects and symptoms and life after cancer. And then that gave them the evidence to get back into the more focused way again of these are the major cancers in actual Norwegian. So collaboration and sustainability requires constant vigilance in the process. That's one of the lessons that I've learned as well. So in final, always, final summation, or coming to the end of this, always look to where the energy already is. Use the energy that already exists, and as a broad rule, burn your own energy where possible. The brain is one of the most efficient energy consumers ever created. The brain uses about 20 watts of energy an hour. I mean, what sort of a light bulb would you get for 20 watts an hour? Maybe one of these modern light bulbs. The rest of the body, about 80 watts. So the whole body consumes about 100 watts an actual hour. So what does that mean from an efficiency point of view? Well, Google estimated a number of years ago that a typical search took up about 3 watts per hour of energy. So the average Google search takes about 0.2 seconds to process and consumes about 0.3 watts per hour. So the human brain consumes 20 watts per hour, or 0.005 watts per second. So for a brain to do a search would require 0.001 watts of energy. So a brain to do a search, assuming that we can remember, is 300 times more energy efficient than Google. So if you don't know it, go to Google. But what I've found over the years in so many ways is that I'm too lazy, or I second guess myself, or I don't want to make the effort to remember, and that I keep going to Google. So if I know it, if I already have it on my desktop, it's 3,000 times more efficient to search on your desktop than to search on Google, because it's in you're searching on your local drive in the process. So that 20 watts in the human brain is being burned every hour. So if you don't use it, it's lost, and then you're adding to it all these extra searches. So our own thinking, doing things ourselves, using our own intelligence, is one of the most sustainable models. Yes, let's use technology, but only when we need it. Technology is infantizing us, and we are using technology at times when we don't need to use it, when we should get up and turn off the light and we wouldn't be as obese in the process. And don't drink that Coca-Cola, and get up and turn off the light instead of asking Alexa. Asking the technology to do the things that we are more than capable of doing is an incredibly environmentally damaging way to go. And we need to burn our own energy, because if you don't burn human energy, what it generally tends to happen is that energy turns into fat, and that is what is driving the obesity pandemic. So leaving you with a concept of burn your own energy. And finally, I've been developing a way to audit organizations in relation to these issues, looking at culture and communities and collaboration and working from home and computers, and how to optimize and what's the best way to use computers and smartphones and the best way to design websites. And that will be the next webinar to talk about this digital waste audit. But if you're interested in the digital waste audit, please get in touch with me, or you can find out more on the website. So that is basically the presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And if there are any questions, it's open to take questions. So Beatrice had said, oh dear, I'd never thought about all the junk created by systems which create versions such as SharePoint. In it, a version is created for every single comma we change in a file if we hit save. Yes, Beatrice, and many of the image manipulation systems, etc. You've got hundreds of versions of a 30 megabyte file. We are just exploding in waste in digital, and we really need to radically change this culture that we have, and we can change it and live a better life. Thanks, Anne, saying amazing and informative. David asking, any thoughts on websites based on WordPress database versus static sites or hosting? Well, yeah, David, I've moved my site. It's on WordPress at the moment, although I'm looking for an even simpler version. But what we do is we create a static version. I don't know whether a static is 10, 20, or 30 times more energy efficient. Most of us don't need database-driven sites. Database-driven sites are much more energy intensive. From an energy point of view, a database site is like a diesel truck, and a static site is like an electric car or a bicycle. Even. So just asking, do we need this? Most of the time we don't need it. It doesn't add any benefit. 99% of web content is static. It doesn't need to be served from a database. What you serve from a database is information that's constantly changing or constantly needs to be updated multiple times a day, etc., or that will build graphs or stuff like that. Most of the content out there, that doesn't need to happen, but we automatically go to the most energy consuming, because we're just drawn along by that tsunami of waste and waste culture. So, okay, who's next? Ollie saying, have you seen any research on React.js energy consumption? I haven't, but would be interested if you do come across, that. But JavaScripting, is it like other connected JavaScript? I know there's a lot of energy issues in relation to, web pages have grown 10, 15 fold in the last 10 or 15 years, from 400 kilobyte to 4 megabyte over the years. So here, what, Carl? Asking yourself, thanks. I need to go back and watch 1970 and reeling in the years and see what else was going on then. Yeah, something happened in 1970, Carl. We really began to absolutely explode in our waste. I mean, when you think of, we landed people on the moon with a megabyte sized hard disks, and processing powers. We can do so much with a megabyte. We can do so much clever stuff with a megabyte is a lot. The first company I worked for back in the 80s, we ran our entire accounting system on a 750 kilobyte floppy disk. So, we can do so much better than we are today. And if we care about the planet, we should care about the waste in digital just as much as we filter the green waste and the black waste. Thank you, says David. In the future, we'll see the world more back to static site. Well, let's hope so. And so looking at all these sorts of issues, and David, you need to tell some if you believe in this stuff, because so many people just don't know this or don't think about this. We need to become, evangelists of these issues and try and educate as many people about them as possible. Any further questions? I think what happened in 1970 is that many of these things started being measured. Maybe true. That's a good point. But certainly, yeah. Whether from the 50s, the 19th, the last 100 years, we really have exploded in so many things. No, I mean, Neil, it's not. I mean, we can change this. Waste is addressable. So if it was, all this energy is being used, and we need all the energy to heat our houses, to move our cars, all this energy we're using. Actually, in some ways, I think it's hopeful, because waste, it doesn't help anybody really, other than Apple and Samsung make multi-billion dollars rather than $1 billion. Waste is a great way to maximize short-term products. It's the planned obsolescent model that most of our industries are based on. So in order to maximize short-term returns, we destroy the earth as quickly as possible. And yeah, the fix-it movement, absolutely, this is what we need. We need a fix-it, repair it. We need the right to repair. There's now legislation moving through the European Union about the right to repair. We need to create products that are repairable and that can be repairable, rather than held to ransom by the technology companies that won't allow anybody else repair the actual products. In fact, most technology products that we buy are ransomware. We have no rights over them, and they have a ticking time bomb inside them that the update of software in 3 or 4 years will essentially make them unusable. And that is deliberate, that is planned, deliberate planned obsolescence in order to make the top executives in Google or whatever, or in Facebook or in Apple or Amazon, just richer and richer and richer and super richer. Since we live in a profit-driven economy, what are your suggestions or ideas to focus more awareness and efficiency than on profit? I think that, but the world wasn't always this way, and humans weren't always quite as greedy as we've become in the last 50 or 70 years. And it is a greed of the elite. So I think it's not as if 95% are tremendously benefiting from this. The middle classes are in decline in the most digitally advanced economies. So I think there are models of ways of living around fix it and repair and maintenance. Imagine if there was a lot more maintenance zone. There would be a lot more middle class jobs. Where, there would be a lot more local engineers in the process if products were actually repairable and refixable. So there are models here that can actually give tremendous jobs and good lifestyles to the vast majority of people, but we won't make as many trillionaires as we used to make. The model today really enriches not really the 1%, but the 0.01%. So I think from a social perspective, we can look at profit for the society rather than profit for the actual elite. And that doesn't mean socialism, so to speak, but it means a changing of the model that we have, because it's destroying the chances of life on the planet. So Bill here, Marketplace needs to see digital waste management as an opportunity for innovation. Absolutely. There's loads of research beginning to happen. The less than 20% of waste is recycled. And a lot of that recycling is actually shredding. I was talking to somebody in a data center recently, and he said that after 4 years, they shred perfectly good working servers. They shred them because they're afraid of downtime and it's going out of warranty, etc. So perfectly working servers are shredded. And shredding is the most crude form of recycling possible in the process. So there's billions of raw materials, gold and etc. in these devices. And if they were designed to be separable, so if we design them in a way, they deliberately design many technological devices so that they cannot be opened with particular custom glues and custom screws, etc., so that they cannot be actually opened. So they're deliberately designed that they cannot be recycled. That's how most of our top companies operate today, that they deliberately design products so they cannot be recycled. And we can change that either through legislation or otherwise in the process. Thank you so much. So yes, it is recorded and it will be available, and we can change our personal behavior. So I'm optimistic. I can't afford to be anything else, but I think we must change the political structure within which we exist as well. Us changing our personal habits, it's great, but it's not enough. But if we can, like and there are some signs of positive change, but we need it coming from a legislative point of view as well, to put pressure on the large multinationals, both legislatively and consumers. And if we, I think, create that pressure from both sides, these large organizations, some of which are seen and are making movements to actually change these business models, I think they will change. I think we can do this. I think we don't have any choice but to try, because the alternative is death of life on the planet in 100 years if we keep going the way we're going. So we have to do what we can do and try the best we can. And because it's waste, we can create a great life and get rid of the waste. It's not about going back to pre-technological days. We can have the best of all worlds, a great life with minimum waste and a healthy planet.